Good Monday morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Monday, October 27th, heading into week 10 of the college football season and the return of Ohio State football this weekend against Penn State. I am joined by our senior producer at 11 Warriors, Chase Brown. Chase, how are you doing at the start of a new week?
Doing well. It's always good to have a bye weekend to kind of reset and recharge. Obviously, the Ohio State season is a long one, working from about the start of August until at least what was last year, January 20th. We'll see if Ohio State makes it that far again this year. They're obviously a front runner to do it, but yeah, definitely good to have some time to just kind of rest and recharge and watch some college football and go into this next week, which should be a big one against Penn State.
Yeah, it is crazy that we're already at the home stretch of the regular season in a certain sense. We've still got one more week of October, but it will be November 1st when Ohio State kicks off against Penn State this Saturday. So it's the season's gone by pretty quickly in some respects, but the what we've all been waiting for in terms of them actually playing the more compelling, challenging teams that are going to come down the pike on their quest to defend their national title can't come soon enough. So it's good that it's gone quickly in some respects, but we're it's about time that we see things gear up here, I think, and see some compelling football, and that will start this Saturday with Jim Knowles' return to Columbus. Before we get too far into the show today, we do want to give our condolences to the family of Ohio State legend Nick Mangold, who passed away yesterday, Sunday, October 26th, at 41 years old. He had announced a handful of days earlier that he needed a kidney transplant due to an ongoing disease related to that he had been dealing with since I think somewhere around 2006. Nick Mangold was inducted into the New York Jets Ring of Honor a handful of years ago and was on the ballot for the NFL Hall of Fame, I think, starting in 2022, about 5 or 6 years after he retired. And he will be on the ballot again this coming season or this coming induction cycle for 2026. So it would be nice to see him posthumously inducted. We would like to see that. Uh, Chase, is this one kind of hurts for me? I mean, not kind of, it does hurt to be honest. I graduated from high school in 2012. I played center on my high school's varsity football team for 3 years, and a big part of the pride I had in doing that was knowing that one of, if not the best player Ohio State had in the NFL at the time that was going on, played center for the New York Jets, and that was Nick Mangold. And he was obviously, even before he got to the Jets, was a fundamentally brilliant player at Ohio State. Was called one of arguably the best prospect at his position in the last like decade and a half by some NFL draft experts going into the NFL. Went on to make the Pro Bowl, I believe, 7 times, was an All Pro twice. Was a big part when the Jets had their brief moment of resuscitation in the late part of the or couple decades ago, and then early part of the beginning of the last decade, when they made two AFC championship games, so it came up just short. He was obviously one of the big instrumental parts of that team's success. So even though he didn't necessarily, get to win a Super Bowl or anything, he was definitely one of, if not the best player at his position in his era. I think it would be more than appropriate to see him get into the NFL Hall of Fame, and I hope that it happens. 41 years old, it was too young, obviously, to see anybody go, but especially an Ohio State football legend like Mangold, and one of the players that inspired me in terms of my own playing career when I was in high school. So rest in peace to Nick Mangold. I'm not sure if you have any other thoughts or condolences you want to offer.
Yeah, it's been weighing heavy on my heart today too, and I think he was a center for Ohio State football, but you could more accurately call him the center of Ohio State football for the early 2000s. I mean, he was a national champion in 2002, an All-American in 2005, a first-round pick as a center. Like, you think about last season, I know he's coming off of an Achilles injury, but Seth McLaughlin was the Remington Trophy winner, and he went undrafted. The center position typically is one that is kind of overlooked or maybe undervalued in the NFL because you can get those guys late in the draft. So it says a lot about the kind of player that Nick Mangold was for the Jets to select him with that first round pick. And obviously, it returned an incredible volume for them, both on the field and for their culture. I think the way that you saw people react to his death today speaks volumes about who he was as a person, the culture that he created both at Ohio State and in New York, the kind of impact that he had on a guy like Rex Ryan, who was breaking down on national television in tears about Nick Mangold's passing and sharing a story that Nick Mangold, who was injured in Rex Ryan's final season coaching the Jets, he decided to play because he knew that Rex Ryan was probably going to be done coaching the franchise once that season was over, and he battled through just so that he could play for Rex Ryan as a coach. Think about Bobby Carpenter tweeting out today that Nick Mangold was somebody that was not just a friend to him but a brother. And so I just think even beyond all of those things, my heart breaks for his wife and 4 kids, and 41 is really it's too young. It's too soon, as you brought up. And yeah, my heart breaks for him and for his family and just all the ones that he impacted throughout his life. I know that he was just a man of incredible character, and somebody that I think a lot of people are going to miss. And certainly the 11 Warriors community is a part of that. So this is a process that's going to be ongoing as we continue to celebrate his life and kind of reflect on all the impact that he made in the Columbus community and beyond.
Well, his obviously, as we've both said, our hearts go out to the Mangold family for their loss. It was certainly an interesting day with that coming in the very, I think, only a couple hours before the start of the NFL slate yesterday. Obviously, you have to imagine how much of an effect that had on the New York Jets community. They were already facing a very daunting challenge with going to Cincinnati, who seemed to be on the precipice of firmly establishing themselves as a bounce back candidate in the AFC North, given the arrival of Joe Flacco. And the Bengals were, I think, something like 2-1 favorites, if not more than that. And Justin Fields obviously had been thrown under the bus by the team owner earlier in the week. So they were staring down the prospect of an 0-8 start to their season, not even having gotten a win yet. And you wonder how much the news of that really affected the Jets emotionally and caused them to go out there and play with even more pride than perhaps they usually would. And we saw that in the form of Justin Fields helping deliver an incredible 39-38 win for the Jets yesterday, in which he spoke a lot about the personal emotion and kind of roller coaster of it that he went through during the week. You have to imagine that for a guy that looks back on his Ohio State career with as much pride as he did, that what happened to Nick Mangold yesterday probably affected him even more so and motivated him more to get the win. So it was that maybe the silver lining, if you will, for what's overall, I think, a pretty sad day for the New York Jets community and also the Ohio State community. But it was nice to see that kind of take shape for them in wake of the tragedy. So rest in peace to Nick Mangold, and all the best to the Mangold family as they navigate their loss. Now that we've spoken on that, we do want to get into week 9 of college football briefly. But before we do that, we want to give a quick acknowledgement to our sponsor at 11 Warriors and the 11 Dubcast this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They're locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. Chase, we were hoping that with no Ohio State football this weekend, that there would be some interesting things that would take place in the sport. And college football is inherently unpredictable. So you would think that with the wealth of other teams playing, that there would have been some sort of wacky upsets or whatnot, at least among the teams that are, if not relevant to the entire sport, at least relevant to Ohio State fans. And I thought that former Dubcast host and founder Johnny Ginter put it very eloquently in our Slack yesterday when we were staring down the prospect of Michigan getting a little bit of gifted officiating grace from the refs to save them in their Paul Bunyan Trophy game against Michigan State in the second half. Johnny put it as, this is one of those weeks where it looks like something cool might happen in multiple games and then nothing does, and I'm mad about it. And that, I think, sums up what happened in week 9 pretty well if you're an Ohio State fan. Nothing terribly compelling took place in the form of upsets that we really care about. Obviously, the talk of the town right now is the Fire Brian Kelly campaign for LSU losing
Mm-hmm.
pretty embarrassingly to Texas A&M. But Texas A&M was favored to win that game, and I don't want the theme of the 11 Dubcast to be let's pile on the coach that everybody wants to fire at this point in the season coming out of every one of these weeks, because we already did that enough with James Franklin, I think, for the last couple of episodes. And he frankly deserves it, I think, more than Brian Kelly does, even though I think most people have even less kind things to say about Brian Kelly than James Franklin. But that's in the SEC. This is in the
I
Big
mean,
Ten.
listen, there may be people who are listening to this episode of the Dubcast after reading the Skull Session, and probably a section or two above this, I was definitely dancing a little bit on Brian Kelly's grave. I can't even say a little bit, George. I was actually dancing on the grave. Yes, I definitely think that's definitely the most important thing to take away from this weekend. Their best season seemingly was a 10-3 year when Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy, but other than that, I don't think you can really look too much at his tenure as a success. I guess they won an SEC division title in his first year as head coach, but that's pretty much all you got in terms of accolades. And I know that he is not necessarily the most favorable person here in Ohio for his departure, bouncing from Cincinnati to go to Notre Dame, and then he bounces from Notre Dame to go to LSU. And who knows, maybe he'll be interviewing for the UCLA job this summer, or this winter, I should say, and see what happens there. But I don't know. I definitely am entertained by what's happening with Brian Kelly down south right now. That's probably my number one takeaway from the weekend.
I think the more relevant thing for Ohio State fans, rather than the developments in Baton Rouge this weekend, is more so Indiana continues to just buzzsaw through everything in their path. I've been trying to talk up UCLA as the most compelling opponent Ohio State has left on its regular season schedule that isn't Michigan the last couple of weeks. I know you and Dan have felt similarly, as I've tried to profess multiple times in reinforcing that point on this show. And then Indiana plays them during the bye week and beats them by 50 points. UCLA doesn't get in the end zone. The game ends 56-6. Indiana just continues to roll over every single opponent in their path. And it very much is looking like Ohio State and Indiana are the Ronaldo and Messi of college football right now, in terms of there's those two at the top of the sport, and then there is everybody else in terms of who's actually looking up towards the top. That being said, I was a little bit nervous, especially given if you've read the Big Ten power rankings on 11 Warriors over the last couple of weeks. Our own Dan Hope, in his estimation, thinks the better resume is for Indiana, and that they do have a compelling case for being the number one team in the country over Ohio State. So, with a very dominant, impressive win over a UCLA team that has clearly bounced back from its terrible start, having to fire Deshaun Foster in recent weeks, this kind of a win paired with Ohio State not really being in a position to do anything to control its own narrative this week, given they were off, you could have made a compelling case for Indiana to jump Ohio State this week. And that didn't, not only did that not happen in the polls, but Ohio State actually held on to a very healthy majority of its first place votes in both the AP and the coaches poll. In the case of the coaches poll, even, they only gave up one first place vote out of, I think, the 64 available. So I guess my question for you is, are you surprised that after this most recent week that it would appear that the national landscape, not just relative to the people within the sport with the coaches, but also the media covering it, even after an impressive showing like this from Indiana, there is still very much a firm belief that Ohio State is the best team in the country. Did that surprise you at all that that didn't really budge at all this week, given what took place and what couldn't take place for Ohio State just because it sat idle?
A little bit, yeah. I would say I would also throw Texas A&M into the conversation of them being a team that, at least at the moment, looks like a national championship caliber team. They are undefeated, and for the first time, I think 8-0 since 1992. So this is a Texas A&M team that I think has the ability. Of course, they went on the road and they won at Notre Dame. They had that impressive win. Not, I guess the LSU team's not particularly an impressive win now that it has 3 losses, but they did
Hey,
go
Chase,
into
be
Death
careful.
Valley.
You give the SEC an inch, they'll take a mile.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Yes. But as far as Indiana goes, yeah, they entering the weekend were the only team in college football to win a conference game by 50 points. And then Kurt Signetti and the Hoosiers did it again. They beat Illinois 63-10. They go out, they beat UCLA 56-6. This is a team that, as you said, you used the term buzzsaw. They are just moving through every one of their opponents. It is impressive to watch week after week. And so when you look at the polls, I think Ohio State is getting the credit that it deserves, being the number one team. But I would agree that I think Indiana probably should have received a few more first place votes this time around. I do think that this Indiana team has shown that it is one of the best, if not the best team in college football, strictly based on resume alone, but then also just the way that they are performing week after week. You're hard pressed to find weaknesses with this team. Fernando Mendoza is a Heisman caliber quarterback. Roman Hemby has really impressed me at the running back position. They have 2 really good receivers in EJ Williams and then Elijah Surratt. I believe Omar Cooper is also has been having an excellent season as well. So they have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. And then when you look at their defense, they continue to get after the quarterback. They continue to turn teams over. They had, I believe, 2 interceptions on UCLA that going into this or coming out of the weekend. They had 2 interceptions. And I think that this has been a team that continues to impress me week after week. And I honestly, I can't wrap my head around it that it is Indiana. It is Indiana, the number 2 team in the nation, that continues to defend themselves as being the number 2 team in the nation, and even just has a chance to be in the conversation as being the best team in America. Kurt Signetti has done incredible things there. I think certainly you're seeing him. You're seeing him be the front runner for a Coach of the Year awards, and really, I think taking this Indiana team to the next level is something that he wants to accomplish this season. They won the games that they were supposed to last year, but they lost the game to Ohio State. They lost the game to Notre Dame. I don't think that they want to be the team again that gets to the college football playoff and falls flat against other talented, capable matchup like opponents. They've already proven that they can go out west and beat Oregon in Eugene. They're probably right now, you would say they're on a collision course with Ohio State for the Big Ten championship, and certainly week after week becoming more and more likely to make the college football playoff. Barring disaster, they're going to make the playoff, where they're going to contend with some of the best teams in college football. And I like their chances to compete and advance week after week there as well.
yeah, I don't even know if Indiana fans themselves, given we're only still a few years removed from the Tom Allen era and how that ended, could have imagined that not only would someone like Kurt Signetti turn things around this quickly, but rise their program to the profile that it's already achieved at this point in the season. It, they've definitively, I think, proven at this point that their success last year was not merely a flash in the pan. They are very, very much in the thick of it, I think, for the long term in terms of being competitive at the top of the Big Ten. And it really, this season has kind of cemented a changing of the guard in some ways relative to them overtaking a program like, I think, Penn State. It remains to be seen how Penn State is going to do, who they're going to replace James Franklin with, and maybe they'll be able to bounce back. But it really does feel like that they've kind of overtaken for the time being the Nittany Lions as being one of the, if not the top competitor to Ohio State at the top of the conference. Obviously, there's another team that Ohio State has to get through that I'm not really acknowledging in that conversation at this point, but they cheated, so they don't get that. They don't get that acknowledgement for the long term. But Ohio State still has to get through both of them before we get to the college football playoff. But before they get through either of those teams, still got to go one game at a time, and that means Penn State this coming weekend. The return of Jim Knowles to Columbus. I would recommend reading a piece that Dan Hope did over the weekend on the differences between Matt Patricia's defense versus Jim Knowles' defense this season. If you haven't already, on 11warriors.com. That went up on Sunday. I think you will be surprised at just how many different metrics Ohio State ranks number one in compared to how many Penn State seems to be lacking in this season. It'll really open your eyes in terms of just how much Ohio State was able to retain and improve upon what Jim Knowles did during his time in Columbus and where Penn State has fallen short. Maybe it'll make you feel a little bit more comfortable about the game going into next weekend if you're worried about Penn State kind of treating the game like their Super Bowl. That being said, Ohio State is kind of shockingly 20.5 point favorites when the betting lines opened over the weekend. So it'll be interesting to see if that holds, if there's any movement over the course of the week and how that might change and take shape. But as I said at the top, one game at a time, and we'll have plenty to break down about the matchup going into the game on this show and around 11 Warriors in the coming week. That'll start tomorrow with welcoming back Kyle Jones to the Dubcast to preview film study, and then you'll be able to check film study out on the 11 Warriors YouTube channel on Thursday afternoon. But until then, thanks for tuning in to the 11 Dubcast. We will be back Tuesday morning. Chase, thanks for joining me today. Thank you to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio. And once again, rest in peace to Nick Mangold, and our condolences to the Mangold family during this trying time. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you for tomorrow's episode of the Dubcast. Take care, folks.